The other post office building is not part of a pedestrian zone, so it started interacting with the pedestrian zone service point, which in the info view covered the area's needs regarding the postal service, but it was only interacting with the service point for the commercial area. Okay, that is 85%. Noted. This will be very interesting because we won't do anything traffic related in today's episode of Building Drakken, and still, it might have an effect. Let me explain. We are going to expand on the entire island, so a big step regarding growing the city. But remember, for the island we established the arbitrary limitation of no bridges or tunnels or any of that stuff. I didn't want to end up making empty promises, so I had to test things out. And it was a disaster, let me tell you that, but also a very insightful experience. You see, since Cities Skylines does not feature roll-on, roll-off ferries, I figured such a body of water could serve us as a natural border for all those vehicles. And an entire island without vehicles in turn could then increase our traffic flow percentage, right? Anyway, the project turned out to be much more complicated, and also I noted along the way that some builds actually would totally deserve their own episodes. So after learning through failing a lot, I decided to restart the entire thing. So all we are going to do today is starting a residential area with a few surrounding commercials and me sharing some very insightful findings. The island is a very big project, so it requires public transportation. Now, one of the ideas for the island is to turn it into kind of a tourist magnet, a tourist trap kind of thing. So if we have like these 2 docking ports for those big cruise ships, and then we could manage to keep the tourists on the island, that would drastically reduce, the impact on the rest of the city. So we are going to add lots of leisure commercial, lots of tourism specialization, the new hotels and retreats. Sure, a zoo, because we don't have a zoo in the city yet. A little marina, all kinds of stuff tourists love. So pretty much we'll trap them on the island, everything's walkable there, yada yada yada. Pretty much try to keep them there, okay? Now, tourists love monorail, so that's why as for public transportation on the island, so we are going to establish a monorail system. Now for this episode, besides the humble beginnings of the island settlement, the main focus shall be the issues which came up, my thoughts on how to tackle them, and tinkering with some items which did not seem to fit. And then finally, the new plan, how we are going to solve all this. But one thing after the other. Because first I would like to talk about something else, just because I feel I owe you guys an explanation for the recent lack of content, hoping you understand what caused the delay. Myself not being in the mood for making videos had several reasons. First off, Cities Skylines 2 came around, and Cities Skyline views tanked on pretty much all channels. So my motivation to do a giga project like this one was, let's say, limited, because putting a lot of effort into it when it is hardly getting watched is not a very motivating prospect. By the way, if you like what you see, a like on a video really goes a long way, thanks in advance. Then for those which follow my channel and also the community section, probably also know that Shiva became really sick. I had to let her go. Who also has pets probably knows losing them really sucks, for you become very attached to those fur noses. Then came the new year, and that is pretty much tricky every year for me, because chances are I'm again fighting with mental health issues, and guess what, this year hit me hard. Through December and January then, I was building on this actual project, just to notice at the end of January that it simply does not fit within a single episode. Not only because of the traffic nightmare I caused within the city, but also because I was so focused on this build that I forgot to monitor the outside connections, and the game messed those up again, causing outbound trains to get stuck. Remember, Drakken was built with the intent of showing that you do not have to rely on offices to minimize traffic when building a big city, and instead, with proper logistics, you could also build a profitable industry for jobs and export goods. Loads of goods. Just to prove the doctrine circulating in the community about this topic is wrong. It works, but requires much more babysitting behind the scenes to pull it off. Actually, keeping track of what's going on in the simulation for me is one of the most satisfying parts of this game, because we are kind of dancing on a knife's edge with our logistics. Not like some newer game that does not care whether you have public transportation or not, as proven by Imperator, and goods magically teleport to where they are needed, just providing the illusion of a city builder, and instead just being a city painting canvas with arbitrary challenges which do not result from real traffic issues. I really don't get what they were thinking releasing a city builder without a proper simulation. Alright, that was quite enough ranting for a single video, and I am sure that giving the game a few years, a few people might like it, but for people which desire the feeling of satisfaction by overcoming challenges the game throws at you, there is no point of playing a game that has not a fully operational simulation. And given the information the devs release, they are still stumbling in the dark, clueless about what made the original so magnetic to the different kind of players. That said, I think we are better off with this game, and thus let's grow the city. So even though I didn't plan for it, now comes the educational part. And we are meeting old friends like the shortest route fallacy I talked about in several videos now. You may have guessed it by now, a major issue when building the island was logistics. I was not sure how much cargo a freight ship could transport. Turns out a single port does not suffice. Problem is though, because of the shortest route thing, there is also no way to split the cargo between two routes. Because, well, on the sending side, adding multiple cargo docking ports would only result in the one closest to become heavily favored and the other ones pretty much idling along. Well, eventually by some magic reshaping the entire harbor, that could be somewhat fixed, but on the receiving end, all those freight ships would pick the first cargo port on their way, all of them queuing there and ignoring the other docking options. So what we need is a transportation system that would allow us to control where stuff is going and applying the knowledge of the shortest route. In principle, we would have to bring railways over to establish multiple stations on the island. Given its size, I think about 3 should do it, and then place the service points for the pedestrian areas in the direct surroundings of those stations. That's the only way we could get enough throughput to pump our goods into the big commercial zone I had planned for the island. But there were other issues as well. The zoo entrance buildings and post offices would only attach themselves to regular roads, not pedestrian passes. What I also noted is that even though there would be post offices gathered around the pedestrian area, they were doing nothing, in the sense of they were not working. Then I noticed that this post office was working and this one over there did not. Well, the one in the pedestrian area is considered a building that generates garbage and is then being taken care of. The other post office building is not part of a pedestrian zone, so it started interacting with the pedestrian zone service point, which in the info view covered the area's needs regarding the postal service. But it was only interacting with the service point for the commercial area. The residential area lacked postal service entirely. I looked at this being baffled for a while until I noticed something. The cargo rail station is part of the commercial zone. So basically, as it is taken care of by the commercial service point, it becomes part of that area and thus only transports mail for this area. As soon as I changed that, the next train that arrived had 3 post trucks. First heading for the post office, and then from there again 2 trucks spawned going straight for the residential service point. So if we want to establish postal service for a pedestrian area, you need a post office or sorting facility residing on neutral ground to interact with a pedestrian area service point. This also explains how our garbage collection on the island works. Since it is not part of a pedestrian zone, it sends out garbage trucks, which when entering the pedestrian area just disappear, until they reappear on the streets which were housing the zoo entrance gate buildings, collecting garbage all along the way, even when invisible. So that is really interesting to keep in mind when tinkering with pedestrian zones. The service points will take care of all buildings within the zone, regardless of the building's purpose. A post office within the area will be served instead of it serves the area. A train station will be served but also belongs to this pedestrian area. Okay, so for this build, we want some garbage collection to be local. We cannot supply a big commercial zone only by freight ships. Trains would provide a reasonable solution, but would require us to destroy the cargo port, because otherwise the shipping path would again be considered the shortest route. Then it dawned on me, how about putting the pedestrians area service points right within the industrial area, so these goods are not gonna get brought to train stations or cargo hubs in the first place, and instead we totally abuse the magical teleportation of the service points. Then we could keep recycling centers on the island and neutral ground, which, as you may know, produce refined raw materials, except farming. And then we could keep the cargo harbor for shipping these raw materials back to the industry on the mainland. And that is exactly how I'm going to solve this. Yes, we could not abuse the magic teleportation, but you know what? I'd rather keep the no tunnels, no bridges rule, at least for now, because in a future episode, we will have to dive deep into public transport and check the numbers on the ferries to see whether they are holding up to the task as the island grows. Till then, I wish you a great time. Bye!